communication and daily interactions, people define who they are and negotiate their identities with people who are similar to them or different from them. Each individual person has multiple dimensions of identities. This depends on the nature of the individual's social interaction. The sources of identity can range from ascriptive, such as gender, age, ethnicity, and ancestry; cultural, which can be tribe, language, religion, and nationality; also territorial, neighborhood, country, geographic area, hemisphere; also political identity, leader, interest group, movement, party, and class; and lastly, social, which includes friends, clubs, teams, colleagues, and leisure group. Properties of identity can be described by using a vowel, which is how a person perceives himself; ascription, how others perceive and communicate a person's identity; and how the identity expresses itself through core symbols, such as names, labels, or norms. Those symbols manifest themselves in the form of different cultural beliefs, which are actually people's interpretation of the world and the society as a whole. Social and cultural identities may just as well be classified according to the following. Gender identity, which is influenced by the way people are treated in every culture. Each individual society, there are shared norms according to which communication and interactions are considered, either feminine or masculine. Now, the media influences what is to be considered feminine or masculine identity. In age identity, cultures treat people of different ages in different ways. They could be treated with deep respect or with lack of respect. And this all depends on the individual's age. When it comes to national identity, a person is identified by their nationality or their citizenship into a country. Depending on the country they are entering, they may be exposed to people ascribing a specific identity to them because of their nationality or the way they look. Social identity seems to play a large part in the growing years for teens and young adults, and even for adults in the workforce. Peers and colleagues that a person hangs around will quickly become a social group that their identity grabs a hold of. Those social aspects of one's life results in their social identity and their outlook. Social class is a big part of the social identity, such as someone who might be placed in a higher class, middle class, and lower class can be identified by their income, and also by the job that they hold and the position that they hold in their job. When discussing spiritual identity, people are identified by their religion or what they believe in. This may cause conflicts with others who identify with other religions, or may lead to stereotyping.
There's been a lot of talk about identity lately, but how far does it go? And is it possible to be wrong? We went to the University of Washington to find out.
Are you aware of the debate happening in Washington State around the ability to access bathrooms, locker rooms, spas based on gender identity and gender expression?
I think people should be able to have access to the facility.
I think bathrooms could and potentially should be gender neutral because there doesn't need to be a classification for differences.
I think people definitely should have the ability to go into whichever locker room they want.
I feel like at least public universities should do their best to accommodate for those who do not have a specific gender identity.
You know, whether you identify as male or female and whether your sex at birth is matching to that, you should be able to utilize the resources.
So if I told you that I was a woman, what would your response be?
Good for you. Okay, like, yeah.
Nice to meet you.
I'd be like, what? Really?
I don't have a problem with it.
I'd ask you how you came to that conclusion.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be?
I mean, I might be a little surprised, but I would say, good for you. Like, yeah, be who you are.
I would maybe think you had some Chinese ancestor.
I would ask you how you similarly came to that conclusion and why you came to that conclusion.
I would have a lot of questions, just because on the outside I would assume that you're a white man.
If I told you that I was 7 years old, what would your response be?
I wouldn't believe that immediately.
I probably wouldn't believe it, but I mean, it wouldn't really bother me that much to go out of my way and tell you no, you're wrong. I'd just be like, oh, okay, he wants to say he's 7 years old.
If you feel 7 at heart, then then so be it. Yeah, good for you.
So if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class, do you think I should be allowed to?
Probably Not, I guess. I mean, unless you haven't completed first grade up to this point and for some reason need to do that now.
If that's where you feel like mentally you should be, then I feel like there are communities that would accept you for that.
I would say so long as you're not hindering society and you're not causing harm to other people, I feel like that should be an okay thing.
If I told you I'm 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
That I would question.
Why?
Because you're not. No, I don't think you're 6'5".
If you truly believed you're 6'5", I don't think it's harmful. I think it's fine if you believe that. It doesn't matter to me if you think you're taller than you are.
So you'd be willing to tell me I'm wrong?
I wouldn't tell you you're wrong.
No, but I say that I don't think that you are.
I feel like that's not my place as like another human to say someone is wrong or to draw lines or boundaries.
No, I mean, I wouldn't just go like, oh, you're wrong, like that's wrong to believe in it. Because I mean, again, it doesn't really bother me what you want to think about your height or anything.
So I can be a Chinese woman.
You sure.
But I can't be a 6'5" Chinese woman.
Yes.
If you thoroughly debated me or explained why you felt that you were 6'5", I feel like I would be very open to saying that you were 6'5", or Chinese, or a woman.
It shouldn't be hard to tell a 5'9" white guy that he's not a 6'5" Chinese woman. But clearly it is. Why? What does that say about our culture? And what does that say about our ability to answer the questions that actually are difficult?
In the process of communication, all the manifestations of one's identity is expressed with either verbal or nonverbal communications, and nonverbal communication being the most powerful form of communication when talking about identification. Multicultural differences in body language can be identified with facial expression, use of space, and gestures that may be prone to misinterpretation. For example, the use of the middle finger may be a rude gesture in the United States, but a symbol for hello in another. Successful intercultural communication should grow from an understanding of people and their culture and the society in general. There are two approaches to identity that we did not discuss in class. The essentialist approach, which is that there is a universal essence and a unity in each particular culture, and there is the reductive approach, that one argues that a cultural behavior is reduced to concrete factors. So basically just based on their culture. I interviewed 4 individuals who gave me their outlook on identity and their opinions and experiences. Each individual is from a country other than the United States. Who are you?
My name is Patrick Whelan and I'm from England.
What is one part of your identity that most people don't know about you, but you see as critical to who you are?
One aspect of my identity is definitely like how competitive I am. A lot of people don't see that in everyday life. They'll obviously see it when I'm playing sports and stuff like that, but I think that's definitely important to who I am.
How do you communicate your identity to others?
I think the best way to communicate any identity is to communicate it through your actions and how you go about your day-to-day life, rather than, you know, it's one thing to say something and another thing to actually do it. So I think the best way is definitely to show it through your actions.
What are some messages that have been communicated to you about your identity and how it should be performed?
A definite message is, especially me being from England, a big part of the identity there is to always be polite and always be well-mannered. That's definitely a big thing that was preached to me from a young age by my parents and by anyone who was around me pretty much. So yeah, they really showed me how to perform that, especially in different settings and stuff like that. So yeah.
What are some common misconceptions about your culture?
There's a really common misconception is that we're dirty. I don't know if you've heard this, but I've heard that we like don't brush our teeth and stuff, and like I don't really understand that. But yeah, that's definitely a common misconception.
How difficult is the visa process, and have you ever come across any problems?
It can be really difficult. For me, it was relatively easy. Everything went pretty smoothly. I did a lot of it online, and then the worst part of it is you have to sit in a room for 3 hours while they process everything, and it's just a long process. But I've heard of a lot of things that could go wrong, and there's a lot of documents you need to have and different things.
Who are you?
My name is Adriana Rodriguez and I'm from Spain.
What is one part of your identity that most people don't know about you, but you see as critical to who you are?
A lot of people don't know that I'm an only child because I'm really outgoing, and they feel that I should be more attached to my family. And since I'm studying here, it's like real far away from my house. Well, they think that I should be attached to where I'm from in my home.
How do you communicate your identity to others?
I'm really passionate and I get excited about everything. I'm really outgoing and bubbly, so yeah, I just talk a lot to people.
What are some messages that have been communicated to you about your identity and how it should be performed?
Kind of the same thing. I think I'm really passionate about everything, and some people have told me that I'm like really dramatic somehow, but I guess it's like part of my personality and where I'm coming from.
What are some common misconceptions about your culture?
A lot of people think that people from Spain are the same that Mexican people, which is not true because we're completely different and we have completely different traditions and cultures.
How difficult is the visa process, and have you ever come across any problems?
I think it depends on the type of visa that you're trying to apply for. With the student visa, you should not have any problems because the school sends you all the information that you need and paperwork. But in my case, I did have a problem with my visa. I kind of got deported last year, but it was just an issue that I had, and well, I mean, it all worked out really well.
Did you experience culture shock when you came to America?
There's one thing that shocked me. The very first time that I came to America, I got out of the plane, and I went to meet one of my friends, and I didn't know the way people meet others here in the United States. So instead of going and shake hands, I just went straight and kissing the cheeks like we do in Spain. So this friend, I was like in shock. I was like, what is she doing? What's this? So it was like really interesting that it was a complete different thing.
Who are you?
My name's Claire Mackay and I'm from Sydney, Australia.
What is one part of your identity that most people don't know about you, but that you see as critical to who you are?
I think growing up in Australia, one of our biggest parts that form our identity are environmental factors. Like, we live very close to the beach, and that's where we spend a lot of our holidays, so I think that's impacted how we grow up and how we identify ourselves. Like, we like the outdoors, being active, and I think that's quite a crucial part.
How do you communicate your identity to others?
I think the main way I communicate my identity is probably through my accent. Being in America, physically I look the same as the majority, but once I start to talk, that's when people identify me as Australian and start to learn more about me.
What are some messages that have been communicated to you about your identity and how it should be performed?
Probably the main one, being an athlete. I think gender roles still play a part of that. Being a tennis player in particular, we're meant to be polite and good sportsmanship, which is how everyone should perform that, but I think it's looked down upon more on females if we start throwing our racket and being aggressive on court.
What are some common misconceptions about your culture?
I think our work ethic, a lot of people associate Australians as being laid back and easygoing, which yes, I think we are easygoing, but I think we work hard, and that's developed from high school, for example, like in our senior years. We're competing to get into university, so we need to reach a certain mark to get into a course, and that's also dependent on how we rank within the state. So from an early age, we're competing and being in order to get where we want to be. So we develop a strong work ethic.
How difficult is the visa process, and have you ever come across any problems?
The visa process is very long. It was definitely an experience. Firstly, we apply online to get our visa, and the amount of identification documents which they need, from passports, bank statements, is extensive. And then going into the US consulate to actually process the visa, I think we go through security checks about 3 times before we get into the building. And then you have to have a one-on-one interview with a consulate officer, which is quite intimidating, straightforward but intimidating. Personally, I haven't come across any problems with my visa. We have to bring in an I-20 form every time we come into America. If we forget that, we have to we get interrogated pretty much, and that is something I definitely do not want to experience. I know others have, but our visa influences a lot on what we do, especially in America.
Lastly, did you ever experience culture shock when you came to America?
I think overall the culture is very similar to Australia. Obviously it's different being away from family and friends, but probably the main culture shock was the food and Americans' routine around it. I found Americans eat very early compared to Australians. We would have dinner around 8 o'clock, which is common, but here a lot of people eat around 5, 6 o'clock, which was something I had to adapt to, but yeah, it's definitely different.
Hi, I'm Dean Pinhas, and I'm from Margarita Island, Venezuela.
What is one part of your identity that most people don't know about you, but that you see as critical to who you are?
I think most people don't know that both my parents are from Israel, and so they see me as somebody who's from most of South America, but I also have that third culture that takes play.
How do you communicate your identity to others?
I try my best to kind of give them a general understanding of my history, like where I'm from, kind of things I've experienced. That way it's not like an abstract idea, it's like actual what I've lived through.
What are some messages that have been communicated to you about your identity and how it should be performed?
Well, most people think that for the Israeli side, for my good friends that do know me, think that I should wear like the yarmulke, like the little thing over my head for the Israeli part, and that I should do things well, like dance and like drink a lot because of the Latin part.
What are some common misconceptions about your culture?
I think a lot of people think that Latin Americans, like people from the third world, aren't as educated, or we don't have access to a lot of things, and they're surprised to find out that we do, or they're also surprised to find out that we don't have access to a lot of things they just take for granted.
How difficult is the visa process, and have you ever had to deal with that process?
Well, I know for a fact that the visa process in Venezuela is very difficult. Obviously, it's hard for people from Latin America and South America to get access to the U.S., especially for schooling and work. But I personally had to deal with that because I have U.S. citizenship.
Have you ever experienced culture shock in America?
I experienced a bit of culture shock with the girls. That interactions and expectations were definitely a lot different than in South America, where I'm from.
As mentioned in some interviews, family and community may be a primary socializing agent that defines one's cultural identity. Family and community may have certain ideas about what is appropriate and inappropriate language. They shape our attitudes about what it means to live in a certain geographical location. For another, a primary source of cultural identity might be media and the church. Through media, people may develop certain biases about what it means to be, for example, young, African American, athletic, and smart. These attitudes are likely to be formed that can relate to wealth and one's social status as a source of happiness and success. The church helps define a person's identity by their views and about what is valued to them. Cultural identity is oftentimes recognized in stages. The first stage is unexamined cultural identity. This can be characterized by the lack of understanding of one's culture and cultural differences, and they are rather taken for granted without much critical thinking. The second stage is the cultural identity search. This is the questioning of your culture in order to learn more about it and to understand the implications of belonging to a particular culture. Most times, people question where their beliefs came from and why they should hold true to them. The third and final stage is that cultural identity achievement. People at this stage get a clear sense of their cultural identity and are able to successfully navigate it to the contemporary world. This can include adaptation to culture shock. The acceptance of your cultural identity plays an important role in intercultural communications.